Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Van Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. Uh-huh. So come get some. CromCon. CromCon.
Madness Entertainment Group presents the Madness Comic Network with original programming and additional comic-related content.
Hey, we want to shout out to our sponsors, Daytona Beach Comic Con. If you are a fan of comic books, if you're a fan of comic book conventions, and if you like meeting comic book creators and getting comics and comic-related stuff, then you need to make your plans to attend Daytona Beach Comic Con. This year's show is September 9th and 10th. Silverline will be there, so you should make your plans to be there too. We'll see you there. If you like comics and find yourself in the Orlando, Florida area, doesn't everyone come to Orlando at some point in time to see the House of Mouse? But when you're here, you need to make it a point to visit Coliseum of Comics, especially the one on East Colonial Drive. They carry Silverline comics, even a limited edition Coliseum of Comics version of our comics. So, when you go, be sure to ask for Silverline Comics and tell them we sent you. OCD stands for Orlando Collector Deviants. OCD, Steve and Trish, they're a family of geeks who promote geek things, particularly those around the Orlando, Florida area. They're big supporters of Silverline, and we think you should be supporters of theirs too. Go give them some love. If you are an independent comic book maker and you need to get your independent comics made, you need to look no further than Kablam Digital Printing. They print our books, and they do a bang-up job. They're not only trusted by Silverline, but many, many independent comic book makers. Head on over to kablam.com and see for yourself just how easy it is to have your comic printed by them. And tell them Silverline sent you.
Hi, this is Tim TK, host of That Silverline Show on Tuesday. Join us at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Tuesday night as we discuss pop culture and the joys of making comics.
Hi, I'm Barb Kilber, co-host of Silverline's Wednesday Wham. Join us each Wednesday nights as we discuss comics, literature, movies, and anything else that may catch our attention.
I'm Roland Mann, and I host Silverline's Silver Sunday. Join me every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern as we make mine Silverline.
Well, welcome, kids, to the wonderful world of Wednesday Wham. We got a full house tonight, folks. Look at this. Everybody showed up.
Mm-hmm. Good evening.
Write that down. Wow, Scott. We got Scott Wakefield. We've got Aaron. We've got Rob. We've got Jeremy in the house tonight. Rory Boyle and Barb, the Empress of the Inks herself, Kalberg. Welcome, guys, and welcome to you. Before we get started, I want to thank our sponsors, as we always do, Daytona Beach Comic Convention and the new Orlando Collector Deviants, also a sponsor, and a special thanks, as always, to Kablam Printing, who does the spectacular work printing our books. Scott, how you doing, man? Good to see you.
Good to be here. I was just sharing on the socials, trying to get that out there. I was listening. I really, honest, Dean. I was listening.
Yeah, sure. That's okay. That's all right. We're gonna have a good show tonight. We've got a combination of academic discussion blended with a silly pop culture reviews later in the show, as we always do. Like to have a little bit of something for everyone. Our main focus is going to be the show and tell, the art of dialogue, exposition, and of course art. And how much is too much is kind of what we're going to focus on, which might make this a little bit more of a writer-heavy show, or a heavy writer show, as we said earlier.
Who's a heavy writer?
Yeah, well, we don't name names here, kids. But before we get started, on a diet now. Yeah, I should be. Let's start with you, Scott. Just give everybody, the quick one-line intro, and we'll go around the room here. You first. Go.
I'm Scott Wakefield. I'm the co-writer of Steam Patriots. Issue number 1's out there. Issue number 2, I can't say just as around the corner, but it's coming. It's coming. Thanks everybody. And that's me.
Good deal. Rory, what about you, my friend? Introduce yourself.
Here's a story. Co-creator, Steam Patriots. I'm the illustrious Scott Wakefield here. And you said we're not making good headway on number 2. I think it's.
Well, I didn't say that. I said it's not around the. I don't want people to think it's right.
I'm going to set the bar. I'm going to set the bar high. You guys are going to see it real soon.
It's around the block.
Bold.
It's around the block.
It's down the corner, around the corner. If you cross the bridge,
next to Aunt Emma's house by the big tree. Yeah. It's always around there.
Buried underneath it.
You've gone too far.
Now, if you hit the white fence with the grapes.
Well, we're looking forward to it. Rory and Scott. Barb, introduce yourself. One-liner, two-liners.
Barb Kelberg. A longtime inker. I'm inking for Silverline now. I'm also coloring, which I'm doing as we talk.
Awesome.
And I'm also the creator and co-writer, inker and colorist on my own book, the award-winning Divinity, which the number 3 is in progress. So I'm working on it. Good deal.
We're looking forward to it. Jeremy, introduce yourself.
Jeremy Kahn, doing digital coloring for a bunch of different titles. Right now, I'm going to be hopefully finish up the Cray cover soon. That's all I've seen is 2 covers for that. Other than that, I've also started up some online streaming for my coloring, so check it out at Twitch at Joint Paint. That's
cool. It. Fantastic. Looking forward to that. And another comics veteran, Mr. Rob Davis. How are you, sir?
I'm doing all right. I am Rob Davis for Silverline Comics. I did the pencil and inks on Twilight Grim. I'm also the art director, chief cook and bottle washer for Airship 27 Productions, which is a pulp revival publisher. I do illustrations and the design work for them. And probably what I'm best known for is in the 1990s, I worked on Star Trek books for both Malibu and DC.
Oh, yeah. We remember those well. And finally, last but not least, Aaron Humphreys. What's up, my friend?
Nothing much. I draw stuff, as you can see. The pencil and fire rush and the upcoming obsoletes. I finished my comic yesterday, Goblins.
Ooh. Awesome!
So that whole thing is done. So awesome. So I'm designing the last cover now, and then it's in the bag.
Fantastic. And I'm your host, Dean Zachary. I've done the reboot, issue number 1 of Cat and Mouse for Silverline, and several covers for the current Silverline title stable, and also working on the upcoming Silverblade. So now that all the table has been set, let's dive right into our subject tonight. Okay, let's go with start with a writer here, Mr. Scott Wakefield. You knew I was going to pick on you first, right? You had to know this. Let's talk about dialogue. Let's talk about exposition. How much is too much? And let's start with exposition first.
Ooh, okay.
And let's talk about that.
Strong feelings on that, especially if we're talking about dialogue.
Okay.
Dialogue, I feel. This is a Scott Wakefield statement. This is a Scott Wakefield feeling, and this is what Scott Wakefield likes. Because this whole subject, we could just say, well, if you like it, we can end it there. It's if you like it, then it's good.
Scott Wakefield talks about himself in the third person.
In the third person, much like Dr. Doom.
Scott says, and I feel exposition in almost every case, if you can find a way to trim it down to its minimalistness, is what you should do. Now, you read old books and they're full of exposition. I like old books, but I think we mentioned try to read Nathaniel Hawthorne or House of the Seven Gables or something like that.
Yeah.
It just goes on and on and on, and nothing happens, and that's all good and fine. But especially in the comic book world where we want to keep a pace, exposition, and again, this is my feeling, this is what I try to do. Exposition can be handled by dialogue. I love dialogue because you can impart so much information with one line. You could have, you could describe somebody as a gangly, awkward teenager with this hair and that, or you could have someone say, well, he's a funny looking kid. You could, and you leave it at that. And we do have the beauty of visual elements in comic books, but when you can describe, man, I had a rough day in dialogue, rather than saying, Joe got to work late and stepped in a mud puddle and his tie got caught in the printer. And you could say that later if it adds to the story, but I really, really feel like in the writing realm, and when you're writing prose, comics, anything, if you can eliminate exposition, do it. If you can eliminate it and replace it with action, do it. And I'm of the camp that I feel dialogue is action. Something is happening. People are talking. So I love dialogue. And if I can tell a story with dialogue, I try to do that. Not all the time, but that is my method, I guess. So
it's your modus operandi.
Yes. Thank you, Rob. That is the way I like to tell stories. I love using dialogue. Now,
do you have in your mind, now the reason I'm asking this is that I use a software called Final Draft, the 12th iteration, and there's a graphic novel template in there, and as you're going through it, it gives you some recommendations on writing each panel to panel. And it says that it's recommended between 25 and 35 words, and I had never read it quantified so succinctly and exactly. In your head, do you have like a word count going on, or is it an instinctual thing?
I read it out loud, and that's something I recommend to everybody who writes anything. Before it goes to a proofreader or an editor, especially a proofreader, again, anything, read it out loud because you'll feel the pacing. Now, a comic book, I think, needs the beats a little more, even more. Where do you break the bubbles? Or where do you stop and maybe do a page turn? Reading it out loud, I think really helps with the rhythm, the flow, and the natural. If someone were to make a stop or an interruption. Now, as far as count, that a lot of times comes to a visual thing, because if there's balloons start filling up the panel and you run out of space. Now, sometimes that might be a visual element in and of itself, because you've got somebody really like blabbering on like me. If this was a comic book, it'd just be all words in front of me and you'd see my eyes or something. So that might actually fit. But a lot of times, because you want the art to show through, if you an economy of words, I think is necessary, except for sometimes those cases where you do want you want a little extra, and I feel like it falls into the visual sense. But that's me. That's my feeling on the whole question.
That sounds good. It's a balanced take, being reasonable and being let's say aware of how much dialogue, and less exposition, more exposition hidden and hinted at within the dialogue.
If you can. Sometimes it's not even. I like captions. I kind of like the thought balloons sometimes, but I know that's kind of fallen out of fashion. So it's moved into the caption world, and everything's serve a purpose. Again, if you can tell, say later or meanwhile, that says so much more than down the road and across the street and over the bridge. But sometimes, every once in a while, a little bit of flowery exposition is good. But again, read it out loud, find the pacing, and see how it feels in the big picture. With and a variation too. I like a variation of in any writing sentence structure. Longs and shorts to keep a pace going, so it doesn't become tedious or ponderous, like, again, the sound of my voice here. So I'll pass it off.
Makes sense as he rambles on. No, it's okay. It's all right. Rory, we're going to segue to you because you and Scott work together on Steam Patriots and other things. So how do you feel about it? Do you take this judicious approach of balancing exposition within the dialogue? How do you feel about all this?
I think balance is subjective. I think it depends on what type of story you're writing. Is it a slow slink in the shadow, political espionage, with a little bit of action, at the climax, or is it a story type that is every actionable item is what drives the story forward, or is it knowledge based? It's the coming to a conclusion of something that pulls you along through the story. And you can, depending on how you write the story, is how you would weight it, how you would balance it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're visually pacing the story, that's one thing, because I think if that's your main focus, the dialogue has to follow that. So you don't want to overload it if you're more visual. I think when you're making film, you have to show more than you discuss. Like Scott said, you think dialogue drives story, and it does, but it's usually always accompanied with the action. If somebody says they're going to do something, then they have to do it. So,
and
it's like an audience.
Saying dialogue though, what's his name? Quentin Tarantino. Some of the what's the one with the girls that drive the stunt car? It's in the Grindhouse.
Death Proof.
Is it Death Proof or is it the other one?
Is that
Death Proof? It's Death Proof.
She drives the Barracuda, the white Barracuda.
Somebody's stepping it.
Yes.
Okay. What's the one where what's his name drives the other car, the Nova, and slams into the other?
That Jason Statham's one, right?
No.
No.
Anyways,
No, that was Kurt Russell.
Kurt Russell drives the car and slams into the front of the other cars. That's not Death Proof? Or they're both Death Proof?
That's Death Proof.
Okay.
It is. It's Death Proof. The other name was Planet Terror. It's Planet Terror and Death Proof, the two movies in
and they're both in this. Thank you. So the scene where they're in the diner, just blah 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 blah.
Sure.
Blah, blah, blah. Oh my goodness! Get on with it. That's an example of way too much dialogue. So okay, sorry.
Okay.
So I was thinking the restaurant scene in Inglourious Bastards where he's
Can't say that.
It's with an E. It's with an E. It's from.
Oh, thank you.
Where he's eating that dessert.
Wow.
It's the most
T-E-R-D,
grating thing because the use of sound. And you can't do that in a comic book. That's an interesting.
Yeah. Well, so okay, never mind. Beats. I probably brought up David Mamet bemoaning the fact that on a stage you can't smoke anymore because in dialogue he'd throw a cigarette in there because that gives the actor, especially on stage, something to do, to give a pause instead of just standing there. Gives him something to do. I think it's. Anyways, that's David Mamet uses tons of dialogue. If you watch Glenn Ross, I don't know who's
sure.
That's one of my favorite. My wife hates that movie. She and I are pretty much on par with most movies. She's like, "This is the dumbest, worst movie ever," because nothing happens in it. It's like a nothing. It's all people talking. I love it. I love it.
Like Death of the Salesman isn't like that?
Exactly. Just a lot. But it's really heartfelt and it tells a story. You don't need exposition. In Glengarry Glen Ross, it opens with Jack Lemmon there on the phone in the rain. He's like, oh, sorry, honey, I almost had him. And he's like, exactly what's going on. You get this character because he's on the phone and he's talking. That's one I love. That's one of my go-tos for dialogue. I love that movie.
Dialogue does reveal character.
Yeah.
Roy, were you in the middle of something? Or okay, go ahead.
I think if you can plan your story out enough that you have themes or motifs, then you have to repeat something, either a color, a scene, or a phrase. So you're going to have to lean heavier one way or the other, depending on what you want to get across. And my final point is, to nuance it all, montages fix everything.
The training montage.
Yeah.
It all goes back to the training montage from Rocky.
And then the freeze frame. Right?
Yeah. The freeze frame.
There's no exposition there.
You don't need it.
Problem solved.
Problem solved. Excellent point, Barb. What about you? How do you feel about you're getting sort of more into the writing, even though you're more the plot and storytelling in this case. But I'm sure that even as you're working on the plot side of things, you've got to think about how much dialogue is going to be here and where's it going to go.
I was going to start out by saying I cheat, but that isn't exactly true. I cheat by turning over all my notes and plots and everything to R.A. Jones, and then he scripts it, so he's an expert at that. Mm-hmm. But that's not exactly true because, for instance, we're in the middle of doing issue 3, so that's all plotted out, and 4 is plotted out. But I'm just gotten into plotting out the next arc.
Okay.
And I realized that at the beginning of the next arc, issue 5, we have to kind of catch up because we're moved past and we've had a little time jump. Okay. Now you could sit around and do Wally Wood's 22 panels that always work, but that's pretty boring. And I don't like a lot of exposition, but in the case of the beginning of issue 5, I found it necessary to at least catch people up a little bit and to talk about their plans to escape notice. So what I did was I have a very short attention span. So I did it the way that I would want to see it to keep my interest. And so while the adults are talking in the foreground and they kind of fade into the foreground and they have the word balloons, we see Divinity in the background and she's doing something in the background. So while we're reading the exposition, she's digging through Olivia's bag and coming up with, her bras and a copy of 50 Shades of Grey and stuff which she should not be getting into, right? But this gives you something to focus on while the adults are talking in the background.
Got it.
So that's kind of a trick that works, is that instead of just having boring dialogue between two people, keep something going as you're catching people up. So that was my idea, because I felt that I wanted to get, while the adults are doing, the focus is supposed to be on Divinity for the most part. So I put it there, and she's misbehaving.
I like that idea. I like that. That's a very efficient use of time and space there in your storytelling, because you're doing two things at once. You're basically doing previously in Divinity as you're moving forward with her silent action, and then the dialogue is covering previously on. How do you feel about that in terms of a previously? Do you like that, actually having a previously in page that catches everyone up, or would you rather it be more organically blended into the story itself?
Well, the exposition isn't really previously on, Here's where we're at. We're stuck out in the middle of X, and in order to get to the Z, we need to do this, this, and this.
Okay.
So, like, we need to ditch the credit cards, and we need to, take all the money out of our credit or our banking accounts and stuff like that. We need to get rid of some logical steps before we move into the whole action, because people are gonna find your plot holes if you don't do certain things. And it's going to become obvious why they have to do this stuff later on. So you have to set it up.
Sure.
There's things that you have to set up in order for the people to understand why you're doing some of the things you're doing, or why things happen the way they happen. But sometimes it's not always exciting. So I thought to throw in a little everyday montage, a little slice of life, funny thing to not only break the tension, but to break the boredom of an exposition.
Yeah, we used to do that in the 90s. We called it Shootout in a Strip Club. But, that's... you would do that, just non sequitur. Let's do this next scene, which is a boring conversation, and have it in a strip club.
Yeah, there you go. That's what
absurd.
Yeah.
I prefer
I think
the tried and true method of
I can't hear.
Having two people talk and say everything to each other that they should already know. I like that. I like when someone tells the other guy, "Well, when you crashed the car last week," I like that.
That's always good. Yeah, yeah.
Or the tried and true introducing the new guy. You got all
right.
Yep.
So, Aaron, what about you, my friend? When you're writing stuff, do you want to have more dialogue and exposition, less. How do you balance it all out?
I think it just depends on what I'm doing in the scene.
Okay.
I have conversations that last up to 8-9 pages.
Right.
And but I want you to pay attention to them.
Right.
And so I will concentrate. I will break the dialogue down so each panel is a form of acting.
Okay.
So instead of showing somebody just sitting there like a head and just spewing a bunch, I break a lot of it down by sentence, so you see how the person reacts and is responding to the information given to them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I
don't think a lot of comic book artists use facial expressions as much as they should.
Yeah, and I try to put pauses in my conversations too.
Yeah. They have maybe 3 expressions they can draw.
Yeah.
That's part of it.
Yeah.
It's how good they are at doing expressions. Richard Dunn says, I can imagine that Steam Patriots is going to have a ton of that type of combined action dialogue with Felix in the background and soldiers arguing in the foreground. Guys, writers of Steam Pats?
Richard Dunn, VIP, Steam Patriots fan. Soldiers don't argue, they shoot each other.
Nice one.
Yeah, they burp, they fart, they scratch themselves, they eat behind the tents. There's all kinds of things that can be doing.
Mr. Richard Dunn, yes, we will be mixing up. Of course, we've got to have Felix doing stuff and war happening, or Felix, if he's with the Americans, the colonials. I think we've got to mix it up because we do have to tell a story. And so if you read number 1, which I know you did, number 2 has to have a moment where we catch our breath. And but we do like, Roy and I both, we've paced it out. We like the highs and lows. And and like Aaron was saying, dialogue, and I do like that. The thing is, though, is like when you're paying an artist, you can only afford so many panels. So when you want to have a great conversation where it's like the 180 turns or a blank panel where there's a reaction, you can do those. But sometimes you're like, okay, we can't take up the rest of this comic. We got to get to the big scene. So yeah, there's got to be a balance. Always a balance. But I think we're all kind of saying the same thing. Like it's got to fit. It's got to fit. If you need it punchy and short, or if you need to slow things down. It's got to fit.
Sometimes
we've got a Rory message here.
Oh man,
we've got Rory fans in the house here.
Wadkers, yes. Actually, Scott, this was your replacement when you left me.
Indeed.
Buffalo. All right.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah. That's all right.
That's cool. That's very cool.
Cool.
It's good that you guys are listening. So Jeremy's back. A perfect time. Jeremy, how do you feel about dialogue and exposition? I know your specialty is color, but I'd love to hear you weigh in on this as well.
Yeah, first of all, sorry about that. My headset just died. Well, yes. So, actually, what the example was for my own comic book that I'm writing. One of the main scenes I have is you have this alien character who's basically going over this plan to solve a problem with this other character. They're inside this big laboratory. The problem is, the entire plan is her explaining how she's going to do it. It's basically all a bunch of technobabble, basically explaining everything with nonsensical words. And since it goes on for a good page or two, I had to figure out a way to basically not make it look boring, as a character is basically sitting at a computer explaining to another one. So a good way I have it to go about this was I basically decided to have a lot of visual elements going around at the same time to balance the boring text. So like the other character, his main trait is that he's like a straight man character in a comedy routine. So the entire time he's freaking out and he's really just reacting to the situation at hand while she's trying to calmly explain everything. So I had that comedic element balancing out the comedic visual element balancing out the more straight, boring type text. So I take that balance between the two.
I like that. Yeah, it's a good solution. Rob, what about you, my friend? Dialogue, less, more. How do you feel about it when you're reading a comic?
When I'm reading a comic, I like a good balanced mix of both. There are times when a good caption that goes beyond what can be shown in the picture kind of explains what's going on, maybe even gives some of the the emotion behind what's going on, other than what the is seen in the one scene. Because in a comic book, a lot of your action happens in between the panels, happens in the gutter. So, and there's only so much you can do in the art, and so much you can do it. So you need a good balance of both. Now, I've worked on books. Of course, Star Trek is mostly dialogue. There's not so you learn the tricks on how to make that happen, like what Barb was talking about. Even if it's not in the script, you come up with something for the characters to do that's logical visually while they're talking. If they're sitting at a table, maybe they're drinking Earl Grey tea hot or something, and they're putting, so you have to have them doing things. But for the most part, it has to be the beats. There's beats in a story. What kind of song are you trying to compose with what you're writing? So it's the beats. There will be times when the dialogue is real short and choppy, and other times when there's a slow emotional piece in there. So it'll be either a big panel with a lot of dialogue in it, or it can be all told in the pictures. But a good balance, and again, it's what kind of story you're trying to tell, and what kind of music you're trying to make with the visuals and the words. So
that makes sense. Paige Higgins says, "Howdy, y'all."
Paige is
Howdy, Paige.
Paige is a international Steam Patriots super fan. Hi, Paige. and now she is national. So
wow, very nice.
She's here on our shores.
Very good. Very good. Oh, she's going to appear.
No. She is here. She is here.
She has appeared.
She has appeared.
The beautiful shores of freedom in America.
Very nice. Very good. Excellent. One thing I haven't heard anyone talk about is the art blending with exposition and dialogue. And one of the devices that I'll use very often, if you have two characters and they're going back and forth, and it's a very, shall we say, dialogue-heavy scene, is I'll do a very large panel. I've even done this as a page before, where you have, each character on each side of the page, and it's just a splash, and then you have their dialogue back and forth, like running in between them, which gives you that splash look. So you got something to look at, but then you can quickly read through that dialogue. Have you ever you've done that one too, I'm sure, Rob, as well. I think that works to keep it interesting, to have a nice splash page. The other device I haven't heard anyone mention yet is what I call cross-cutting, which is incorrect really, but you'll see what I mean when I describe it. And that is when the exposition and dialogue has nothing to do with what you're showing. Barb sort of touched on this, and some of the more high-minded literary writers do this a lot, like Alan Moore and Morrison does it a little bit too. But they'll have two characters stop talking, and then a completely unrelated visual spectacle unfolding underneath.
I thought you just told Scott to stop talking.
No.
Stop talking.
No.
The wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable.
Wow.
It was good.
No, we may get there eventually, but not at this time. Have you guys noticed that? Have you ever thought about doing that, Scott? Like you'll have, the dialogue back and forth, but then something completely unrelated in the visuals. Maybe even happening, like in your case, it would be the Redcoats would be doing something as the dialogue between our leading colonial characters unfolds above the action.
Yeah, I have thought, and actually, I don't know if I've employed that. I'm kind of thinking we may have what do you call it when the audio starts before, they start talking on this, and then the video, the same thing, like cross, whatever you call it.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about that where the dialogue or the starts, when the image doesn't match, and then like a page turn. That we kind of we thought about doing it if people read number 1. The final page, the page turn is almost a mirror. Felix is saying the same thing as his dad is. We thought about doing, but it was confusing visually. It just did that. That's maybe a good example. We tried it. We put the word balloon there. We tried doing like to Felix's mouth and off the page, like his dad saying the same thing, and it didn't work. So we just had them both. Like you read it once, okay, turn it. Oh, his dad is doing the same thing as he is, and because we don't want to give like the exact impression that it's happening at the same moment, but the same thing happened.
Correct.
You can use the comedic effect very well, I think.
Jeremy, you got to move a little closer.
All right, sorry.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, I'm saying you can use it for comedic effect as well. Like look at the old Rocky and Bullwinkle shorts where the narrator is describing the scene.
Yes.
What's going on in the episode.
Perfect.
Nothing to do with it.
Right.
And the characters then they react to one another.
Yep. Yeah, we're not going to put a lot of Rocky and Bullwinkle-esque comedy in this one. Maybe we'll do the spin-off, the comedy one-off in another universe.
Fractured fairy.
Everybody's got you.
Yeah, you're talking about your characters talking about something while visually it's meanwhile over here. Type of thing. I like that. That type of storytelling.
That's a nice technique. I like it too. I like when when I see it in a book.
Then you have
especially when it's. Go ahead, Jeremy.
I was thinking to the cartoon stuff. We have another fun one where you're working the exposition into the dialogue naturally. I'm thinking of the Poochie scenario, where basically you have the characters over-explaining something to make the reason for something existing make sense. Even though as the viewer, that doesn't make sense, but since they're saying it has to.
Correct.
How do you guys get around the whole exposition and long-winded dialogue in the middle of a fight scene?
Rewrite. Just throw it all away.
That drives me crazy. You don't have time to sit there and shit post about to your villain while you're hitting him.
You just have to taunt. You can only use taunts in fight scenes.
Now there are certain comics can get away with it. I think like Deadpool, for example, can just freeze the entire panel and just fuck over it.
Absolutely.
Now you could it depends on how you write it, because if you could do like a caption as an afterthought, or if you can always what's cool about comic books too is you can bend time a little, is you can have your character thinking about something, and that bleeds over into that fight while the fight is happening, and they've thought about it then, this is happening now, but the thoughts are coming up. Or if it is in a retrospect, you can throw a caption in, because and that works in comic books. It does. I don't know if it works in any other medium, unless you do like a voiceover in a movie. But
thought is as fast as you can think it, but it's like the old time comic books where Superman is talking to the villain as he's pounding him. It's like, why are you doing that? That's not real life. You don't have time to have this long exposition.
Have some good conversations while they pound the crap out of each other.
As far as modern writers, Bendis does a lot of dialogue during fights, and I think the way they handle it is Bendis will write all this quippy back and forth dialogue. Let's say if Iron Man is quipping against the villain he's fighting, or Spidey is, and they'll do a montage one-page fight, which I've always thought that was kind of a cheat because I like long action sequences. But a lot of times these days, they'll just do a one-page fight scene where you'll just have a collage of entanglements between the hero and the villain. A montage, indeed. And then you'll have staggered quips.
Montagement.
As, cascading down the page as the two characters are entangled. Yeah. And that's a style. It's not my particularly favorite style, like the more classic Spider-Man style, where Spidey's thinking usually things like, ouch, that hurt, like I've just run out of webbing. I'm in big trouble. My arm just went numb. I don't think I can, get through this fight without, I'm going to have to find another way to take him out. That kind of thing. And then the fight actually usually had a 2 or 3 page context to it. It would go on for a while, but it always led to something. And that was always fun for me, being a fan of action comics in general, the more action scenes. But storytelling action always fascinated me more so than just, it's a fight montage. It's almost like Bendis or these current modern writers just go, fight montage page, and I'll write all these quips that they say to each other during the fight.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about, right? You've seen that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind short little quips because you're gonna talk turkey, back and forth.
Trash talk. You're gonna trash talk a little bit.
But these long expositions, like I found you by going into the library and discussing and tracking your movements through the county court. While they're sitting here. And one of them was telling them how they figured out
the twirling mustache villain telling us,
the villain exposition,
No,
right,
Mr. Bond,
right.
I expect you to die.
Right, Mr. Bond, right, that whole thing.
We had to work Bond in, didn't we?
Yeah.
Wait, good villain speech. Look up Radigan from Great Mouse Detective.
Yes.
Who's that, Jeremy?
Yes. Radigan from The Great Mouse Detective. If you've never seen that, it's a fantastic cartoon.
An underrated, not like The Black Cauldron, which is one of the worst Disney. That movie.
Oh no,
that's a classic.
No. When's the last time you watched it, Rory? The Black Cauldron is. The book is amazing. The Disney movie is.
I'll have to rewatch it.
It makes zero sense. It's like they needed to make a movie fast, and they made that.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was
one of the Sunday night movies.
Oh no, I know which book you're talking about. I have them.
Oh, I love the Lloyd Alexander books, but
yeah,
that Black Cauldron Disney movie is
that was poorly done.
It's on Disney. Like I hadn't seen it since I was a kid. It was on Disney Plus. I'm like, oh my goodness, what a weird movie. And it's like they just they ran out of time and chopped things out, and like it is a weird.
Lloyd Alexander's a weird looking guy.
I don't know what he looks like. Okay. Stop
no
it, Rory.
No Gurgi fans? Okay.
Who?
Gurgi. The dog from Black Bolt.
That thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
What is he eating? He's like a snarf or I don't know.
Golem. It's their version of Golem.
Is weird. Yeah. It's all weird.
It's very strange. Okay, so what about how much art do you guys want to see on a page? Like I've recently seen a graphic novel where there was so much dialogue, literally it looked like, postage stamps underneath all the dialogue balloons. So like that, not a fan of that. Unless you're going to go, like I've seen that done before where it's heavy dialogue, heavy exposition, and then the next page is like a huge double splash with nothing, right? So if you're going to do, tension release like that, I'm okay with that if it's done, to taste. But how do you guys feel about just art? Like there's a lot of purists out there who are like, you know what? You should be able to understand the entire comic with not one word in it.
So, there's some truth to that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But not the entire. I don't think that would work for an entire comic.
No, actually, I'm inclined to being a writer. I feel like if you can script it well enough,
being a writer, not being able to draw, I feel strongly that.
If you can script, like if you're telling a story just like a movie, and you can tell it so well with a visual image, I'm kind of inclined to think that if the artist can say the words you want, can communicate the message you want with an image, I feel like that's okay. Now I don't. Yeah. It's not like I don't want to like lose my job as the writer. But if I'm writing to my artist and this is my script, and I say his eyes say this, or his face, or I think that can be very moving, and that can be just like I talked.
So no introduction at
movie.
all.
A lot of faces going, like, oh my goodness, in the movie. And tell a great story. You don't need to say, wow, oh gee whiz, oh my, I almost blew up.
So you come in blind to a book that you've never read before, never seen, and there's no words. How would you know?
Can be done.
Now I'm with you. Now, Bar, I'm with. I feel like that it fits. Oh, first of all, I don't want to miss Paige's Princess Elonwe from Black Cauldron. From
Yes.
We had a Black Cauldron reference.
Knowing Paige, I wouldn't be surprised if
Badger.
Black Cauldron
Is
is
he a
one of her
badger?
favorites. And
Paige Sisgergi is a badger. Okay?
I would not.
Thank you.
I would not begrudge her for loving Black Cauldron, just like I love the Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings. So
As do I. First
Karen-
hour.
They're musicals. They carry.
First hour.
Karen Pig Wanderer.
Yes. But you're right, Barb. So like I talked about like Cormac McCarthy, The Road. Love it. Love that book. Short dialogue, not a lot of description, not needed. No Country for Old Men, can't read it. I have no idea what's going on because he doesn't say who's talking, where they are, it's just dialogue, which being the guy that said I love dialogue, it does not propel that book. Dialogue propels The Road.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a comic book, right, Barb, you can't start it with just unless you're going for mystery. Like you want the reader to be like a little confused. That's a balance too. You don't want the reader to be like, what the, throw the thing away.
Mm-hmm.
They have to. There has to be just enough where there's mystery and like the images drive it. And if they don't resolve it, then they're failing. Then they're not communicating. They're not sending a message that's being received. It's correctly. It's got to be communicated correctly. So,
Because you would need to start somewhere like far away in the land of Wakefield land.
Well, I have seen comics that are all pantomime throughout, not a single word of dialogue, and they do have some good ones like that.
But most of the fans know who they are coming into it. They're probably picking it up because it's the title of Superman, Batman, Spider-Man.
I've seen indie comics that do full pantomime throughout. Yeah, it's really tough, but that's when it's done well. It is really good to look at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's one I have called Tarot that is no dialogue, and there's another one I have, and they're graphic novels that have no dialogue in them.
Page,
that can work.
Loving the book. Yes, movie for the
memes,
story.
Yes. Movie for the memes.
it's right for the memes.
And then we have. Has anyone read *Sapiens*? It's a non-fiction graphic. I have not.
What is it?
Good recommendation.
What is the topic? I'll look it up. I'm going to go to the interwebs.
Yeah, go to the look it up on the interwebs. One of the things, intentional cryptic dialogue or intentional cryptic storytelling. Are you guys into that? And don't say that it's not popular and it wouldn't work, because our friend Mr. Tarantino made tons of money doing that in the 90s, as did a couple of other filmmakers who would just throw something complete. It almost like they wrote the script and then took the pages and shuffled them and shot it completely out of sequence. And it became like a thing to do it that way. You guys know what I'm talking about. Pulp Fiction's done that way. Yes. Yeah. There's a movie about a guy who lost his memory and he's trying to put his memory back together.
Memento.
Yes. Now that's where I think it's done, obviously, as part of the storytelling intentionally, and then you, along with the main character, put the story together. But I think a lot of times creators can be too clever for their own good. I think Inception is a perfect movie example of this. Matrix Resurrections is a mess because you try to watch it and go, what's happening?
Yeah. It's done well. I do enjoy it because there's like one book series I'm reading where time skips, like each other chapter is a time skip, but you never know what time period each one's taking place in until the number of volumes in. But as you get towards those other volumes, you eventually start to figure out, okay, this event happened before this event, and that's why this happened. And everything starts coming together in a really nice, satisfying unravel.
Okay. So in terms of, as a function of telling the story itself, I think that intentionally cryptic, mysterious approach does work, but it probably should be done by people who are very skilled at writing and drawing. When you break the rules, you need to be good at breaking the rules. Otherwise, it's just going to be a jumbled mess. So balance.
You have to know
balance
the rules
things
before you
out.
can break them.
Yeah, look at Bruce Lee, man. Look at Bruce Lee, man. He was, wushu expert before he made up his own style.
I like a good wushu sauce. Yes.
You know it, man. It's good, isn't it? On some sashimi and anyway. So, but anyway, folks, we're.
I was going to throw in that type of exposition you're talking about. It's actually very ancient. That's how the Pentateuch is written, and I only know that because I'm taking a class.
Nerd. That is awesome, though, that you bring that up. That's very good. Very good.
What is the Pentateuch, Rory?
The first five books of the Bible.
5 books of the Old Testament. Yeah.
The Torah, if you will. And if it's written... Sorry, go ahead, Jeremy.
No, go ahead first, sorry.
That it's written that you're not given details or specifics until the point in the story where it's important. Like when Joseph is seduced by Pharaoh's wife, you don't know what Joseph looks like. You know what he's wearing, right? The Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.
Sure.
Everyone knows that.
Yeah, right? But it's only that moment and Joseph was well built and handsome. Do you know that Joseph is ripped and
right. That's a good point. That's a good point. I mean, again, it depends on your facility with the medium, whether you're doing the art or doing the writing or both. The ability to compel the reader. In a future episode, guys, I'm going to give you a little tease here. One of the subjects we're going to get into is the power of page 1 and how to bring in the writer. Okay, so the reader, excuse me. So how to be compelling on that first page, and I think that's the goal of any of us as a creator. We don't want you to throw it down and go, this is too difficult or this is boring or what have you. You want the person to continue to read it and continue to look at it. So this is all part of our discussion today, balancing art, exposition, and dialogue. It has to be dependent on subject matter. If you're going to break those rules, you have to have the facility with the medium in which the rules that you're breaking. Give us a good example, anybody here, free for all, a good example of your favorite kind of storytelling. It doesn't have to break the rules. It can be by the rules, but give us a graphic novel. It can be a Silverline graphic novel. That would be cool. But something that really just says, okay, these guys got it right. Anybody? Like something memorable, something you just like, man, I go back to that and look at it all the time. ElfQuest. Good call, Barb.
She's a good storyteller. And she's the one where I got the idea of having something going on in the background. Because when she has exposition, there's so many elves, and if you look in the background, they're all doing something different. They're planting or the kids are chasing each other, or, the wolf is pulling on something he shouldn't be pulling on. There's something in every scene that's going on. You got to look at it 2 or 3 times to catch it all, and that's fun.
Good one. Yes. Rory, anything? Anybody else?
I'm still working and building my comic book and graphic novel repertoire. But
I see.
As far as the great annals of literature goes, I like an epic like Beowulf. In the way it's written, it's almost laid out like a comic or a movie, frame by frame. It starts in the middle with a hero and ends with his death. So it's a classic.
Well, if you're going to go literary, I'll have to share my favorite. I think Hamlet does exactly that. It grabs you from the beginning. They're celebrating a wedding, and here's the prince who's like, I'm not happy about this. I'm wearing all black. I'm sour-faced. I'm upset. My mom just married my uncle who I can't stand, and this is awful. This is terrible. How can I even tolerate this? And so you're hooked. And so much of Hamlet, not only the story is something you easily understand and get into, but then, of course, the dialogue that has become so much a part of our English lexicon from that day till today. To be or not to be is still known by almost everyone as a literary reference. Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Fun stories that pretty much read like text manuals to an extent, but they're still fun to read through. I mean, Isaac Asimov had a ton of those. Like look at the Fantastic Voyage. he has two, the Fantastic Voyage and Fantastic Voyage 2. Pretty much the same exact story, just one's updated with more more scientific information. So basically, you're reading a scientific textbook based around a sci-fi story.
That's a good point. Duzlark says Hamilton. So another one.
That is story told in metered verse, right? And not just poetically like.
And it rhymes.
Like Shakespeare, it is sung. Sometimes, actually, I was surprised at how well I understood it. I'm meaning, like, usually a lot when you get like a musical like that, like what was the one with the most recent iteration was with Johnny Depp, Sweeney Todd, right? With him and Helena Bonham Carter, right? Was she? She's always in those weird movies. They sing, and it was written that way where they sing over each other. I couldn't understand a word they were saying. I kept telling myself, "You'll figure it out." Like, just don't stress about it. Don't listen too hard. Whereas Hamilton, while it was very quickly, like a lot of it was related, like very quick. I enjoyed Hamilton, and the story was told really well in that song, and it was very understandable. Which I know sounds silly, like I sound like an old man. I can't understand a word they're saying. It was really well done, and I enjoyed it. I honestly went into it thinking this is gonna be dumb.
Well, along similar lines, one of my wife's favorite musicals is Little Orphan Annie, and she also loves Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory as well. So those are fun, to watch, and you get caught up in the stories, and you don't realize, hey, they just sang half this thing.
Exposition done well by Oompa Loompas, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
they tell you what just happened and what's coming up.
Story alone.
Moves it right along. And let's not forget the classic Wizard of Oz.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yep.
oh yeah.
So
I
that
just
takes you along.
saw somebody put on Facebook, and I remember thinking this when I was little. There's an orange brick road. At the beginning, they spiral. Right, at the very beginning, they walk her over.
Sure.
I don't know. In the book, I know the movie is drastically different than the book. The book was a commentary on money and robber barons and all that sort of stuff, right? Is that in the book? Does anybody know that?
If there's an orange brick road that's specifically orange, and it's not just a color correction problem,
just a visual cue, because the yellow and the orange, they spiral. I don't know.
It's very odd. But yeah, it's interesting how you think to yourself, it's a musical. I just don't think I'm going to be able to roll with this. Yeah. And then you do. And I felt the same way about Shakespeare until I saw Henry V by Kenneth Branagh. And all of a sudden I thought, here's a guy who can take those difficult verses of poetry and put it on the screen, and you're compelled. It may take you a while to get pulled in. Once you're in, you're with it, you get it, you understand what's happening. So, again, visual.
A musical I would suggest for a good is the Hunchback of Notre Dame. That one. Either way.
But
Disney did that as a full operetta. And the thing that's nice about this is the Quasimodo character, they actually go with the fact that he's deaf and he's tone deaf. But the whole time also, as he's singing, the gargoyles in the movie are doing sign language in the background behind him. So you have this nice visual element of the sign language whenever he's singing to go with the actual operetta that's being sung.
Yes, I love that. Yes, I think that's brilliant. One of the more successful ones, of course, that Disney did, The Little Mermaid, right? I mean, lots of songs there. Obviously, the latest one, Lion King. But then the latest one with the what was it? The ice one. What is it? Frozen. What?
Let it go.
He's here.
We don't talk about Bruno. It's now above it.
Did you say something about Bruno? What?
Did you say Bruno was above Frozen?
Bruno,
yes. It's at the top of the Billboard charts now. Sold much more than Frozen's.
Wow.
Let It Go did.
Wait.
Goodness.
Basically, the highest single they had since A New World from Aladdin. It's their most popular song now since The New World.
Wow. Okay.
A whole new world.
Yes.
Can't get it right.
Well, welcome, Brent Larson. How are you, sir?
That movie to death.
Hi.
It's always good to see you. we've been discussing the balance of art and dialogue and exposition, and it's been a great convo today. But we obviously want you to weigh in as well. Tell us about, Kalis has a lot of dialogue, and you put a lot of exposition in that dialogue. But I think the nature of that particular story calls for that. In your mind, how do you approach it? Is it content based for you? Do you have like a word limit in your head, like 25 words to this panel? I don't really want to go over that, or even thinking along those lines when you approach. I know because you're fairly new to comic writing, so when you got into it, did you sort of go like, how many words am I supposed to put in a panel and that sort of thing?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And the answer I got was, so yeah.
It's up to you.
What's weird is I was even doing this literally just a couple of hours ago. I'm working on Cape Town issue 2. And what I ended up doing, frankly, was just taking, here is the Kalis, trade for issues 1 through 4. So basically what I ended up doing was I literally just chose a couple of pages that had a bunch of words, and I'm like, I think that looks pretty good. And then I basically just counted all the words from the script. And what I found was I noticed that on pages that had a fair amount of verbiage, that I was hitting somewhere between, I want to say, like 160 to maybe 230 words per page. And 230, it was starting to look a little crowded. And so what I'm starting to do now is just try to get a word count and try to hit that sweet spot for me, which would probably be somewhere around 200 words. And now I wrote the script for every script I've written for Kalis has actually been a panel by panel action description. But as Justin and I are working on the second issue, I'm trying to actually kind of let him speak more into what the panel design is going to look like, which is interesting because I've never really worked with that before. So instead, what I'm doing is I'm just basically trying to figure out what it is I want them to say. And hopefully, I can still stay within that word count, hopefully fairly easily. But it's going to be a new experience, but that's largely what I do.
Well, that's interesting. Do you use, I mentioned earlier in the show that I'm using Final Draft 12. They have a graphic novel template. And it was interesting as you one of the graphic novel templates, you open it up, and I'm using that one, and it tells you like, it's recommended that you use between 25 and 35 words per panel, which I thought was interesting because I'd never, not being a writer, I never really thought about word count per panel. But it's interesting. Do you use that? Do you use just Word, or do you use Final Draft for your comics as well? I know you use it for the other, but
I do. I had no idea there's a graphic novel
template. And
that's great. I might check that out. Really, what I use is Google Docs because it's easy to share and comment on. And since I try to get several people to critique my stuff when I finish a draft, it's really easy to share it with them and then get their critiques back without having to deal with saving versions of something. So.
Do you, when you're working with your artist, do you say, in terms of making room for the dialogue and so on, do you work closely, or do they just get it and go, oh my gosh, how am I going to make room for all this talking?
I think what they probably do is, at least Lewis for Kalis, probably tries to be mindful of it, but he'll just draw it, and then I'll look at it and go, holy crap, look, who is this wordy jerk? And then I realize, oh, I'd better knock out 25% of the whole thing, and I find that, well, it can be done mostly. So I'm a writer. I just love me some words.
You love you some words, son.
Yeah, Brent, I find that I overwrite, and I have found I provide it all to the artist, and Rory and I hash out what they're going to say, and we do overwrite. But then once you get the pictures back, you can readjust, you can trim down, and you can realize, like we had said before, that an expression, well, that just said a lot more than all those words. So I'm gonna have them say either huh, or no, or wow, or or take it all out. Yeah, take it all out. And I overwrite, and I have found in my illustrious career that trimming it, it's easy to trim it down and paste it a little better once I have the final or close to final images. That's just been my experience.
Actually, in every writing medium, that's what they say. Everybody overwrites. It's the natural inclination.
Yeah.
And you kind of can see why. I mean, I can't draw my way out of a paper bag, but I can talk all day. And I will. But nobody's going to want to read that.
Right.
So what you got to do is find that sweet spot. So
yeah, and we were talking about reading it out loud. I really like to read it out loud, because then you can find a break, a pause, chop a word out, have somebody talk over the other person, interrupt. So saying it out loud, because sometimes you read it out, what you wrote out loud, and you're like, no one talks like that. No one would ever say that.
Exactly.
Brent, another quick question for you. How many drafts of a page do you usually take before you say, okay, that's it? Or do you just that's it, first pass?
Well, what I usually do, this is what I've done in the past, especially with Kalis. It's what I've had the most experience on. I start with just a vague idea of what the story is. Then I will sharpen it to all the plot points I want to hit. Then I'll drill it down to how many, I have 22 pages. So what happens on so many pages, like a scene will be 2 pages or 3 pages typically. And then I'll start to break it down into panels. And then I'll actually script a page, and I'll realize, okay, in order to convey everything I wanted, I'll probably need at least 6 or 7 panels. I'll script out what'll turn out to be 9. Yeah. And then I'll have to see where I can cut to dial it back and fit it into those 7 panels. Tom King he's the guy who loves the 9 panel, bump, 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 bump. And I guess it works for him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm not nearly that confident. So
it worked. Hey, it worked in Watchmen. So,
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
It can work. It depends on the type of story you're telling. A lot of people want to freeze the window to a single size so that you're not distracted by any sort of fancy layouts and breaking out of the borders and panels and silhouettes and all of that, all the 90s stuff that inspired me to be an artist. But I understand that if you're going to want people just to focus on the story more so than the art, that, containing and isolating and freezing it to that 1 panel size, it can make sense and certainly is appropriate for certain stories. If you're going to go super intellectual too, or super literate, like Watchmen,
What's funny is I've had so many people say, Kalis, it's so great. Man, the art is amazing. And I'm like, yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
And what I'm realizing is, maybe it would be okay if I kind of secede some of my control and let the artist actually get to do some freaky stuff. And whenever I see Lewis or Justin on Cape Town go crazy, it's always for the better. I'm just like, wow, these guys know what they're doing. I had no idea. And so what I then do is I try to then take the words and bend them around a little more and thing, which it can be done. So why not? Anyone who's ever going to say, "I can't believe how they're butchering my life," just like, shut up, dude. It's comics are
These
great.
artists.
I love them, and they can be really, really good. But there is some artistry involved, and by artistry I mean drawing stuff, which I don't know how to do.
Now, when I was writing my script, I ran this issue where I decided to give most freedom to the artist to decide what to do. Then I got complaints saying you're not being you need more detail. And the artist started telling me to do as many minute descriptions as I can, like how the entire room was laid out, what furniture was, and everything. So I had the opposite problem, where basically the artist wanted me to just tell him everything and where to place everything.
Yeah.
Yes, usually the collaboration, Jeremy, is it depends on the type of artist you're dealing with. Like for me, you can just say, formal living room, Victorian.
Yeah.
And that's really it. I'll know where to go and get the reference and so on and so forth. And to your point, Brent, earlier, I brought up tension and release. Like if you wanted to do a heavy dialogue, heavy exposition page, and then it's followed by a splash or even a double splash where there's like no dialogue. It's like, okay, the spaceship explodes, right? And that's the scene. So again, you've built up this tension by talking a lot, and then you get this breath of just the art. You take a breath, and then we go back into more of the dialogue and the text. So, again, you look at it like almost like a symphony. It's like music. You want
You could do
like
the
I said
marble
earlier. Yeah.
Fight. Next 4 pages.
Yep.
Fight. Next 4 pages. Right.
They fight.
I love that.
I like that.
I don't have even a double spread that doesn't have any words. I think that would annoy the heck out of me.
Oh, you'd love it, man.
If it's done right,
love
I
it.
love it.
Wait till you see Steam Pages.
Wait till you see
issue number
it,
2,
man.
dude.
There's
All
no
right?
words.
Yeah, no. It's all eyes.
Yeah, with goggles, reflections. That's all you get.
Well, the good thing
Just
about having a lot
imagine.
of dialogue sometimes is the artist doesn't have to draw what's underneath there.
Doesn't have to do
Right.
what?
When you have a lot of dialogue on a page,
Oh,
the
yeah.
artist doesn't have to pay attention to those.
Yeah, you can leave it if you put the dialogue over hands, right?
Yep.
It doesn't have to draw the hands. Right.
That's
Oh,
what
my.
you would pay more
Well,
for
no,
hands,
that's
right?
an interesting
Hence the hand behind the back or the. Yep.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
a good point, 'cause I think Roland would say, quick and dirty. You should have detail on certain scenes, but in between, just move it along.
Well, we
Every
learned
scene
our
doesn't have to be
lesson.
so detailed.
Yeah, we learned our lesson as artists cutting our teeth in the 90s. And Rob, and you and I talk about this forever, but you'd spend all this time drawing, the Colosseum with all the characters in it, and then you get it back and the letters covered all of your painstakingly put together perspective and all the extras up in the stands throwing their hands up and holding up signs and pom-poms and all that. And so, you learn to talk to the writer and go, hey, man, how much dialogue are we talking here in this shot? Because I could spend 12 hours on this background, or I could spend about 3 and get the same point across, What about you, Rob? Did you, like when you were working on Star Trek, did you know at the time, like how much dialogue was going to be in the scene? Like when you were drawing, like, okay, this is going to take place on the bridge. How much of the bridge am I going to have to draw? Am I going to draw the whole bridge and then half of it's going to be covered over in talk balloons?
Well, it was done full script, so you knew how much dialogue or how much
okay, good.
How big the caption was going to be. But so you had an idea. They usually broke it down. There's 5 panels on this page. They didn't tell you to do 2 at the top. You had some room to be creative. So what you would try to do, and what I tell people who are learning how to tell stories in comic books is, on the first panel, that's where you put all your detail. That's where you put where everything is in the room that's going to be dealt with on the next 5 or 6 panels or the next 2 pages. So you do all the detail in the first one. Then from there on, you can draw just the people interacting and leave the background blank for them to put the bird balloons into. So hopefully your writer thinks that way too. Set the scene, make that a big panel, just a little bit of dialogue is to get it started, and then you throw all the other stuff in later on in the panels where the artist doesn't have to show every detail in the panel.
Yeah. I agree.
Claremont,
Claremont, notorious for being wordy, and it worked well for the X-Men. It's important to work with.
Crazy, but
with the writer and talk to them. That's one thing I've learned to do over the years is talk to your collaborator a lot and talk about it get as granular as you want to about the page, and that way you can save a lot of time. And
it works in vice versa too. There's a lot of times when I will look at something that was penciled or inked, and I'm not understanding what's going on this page. So I will call the writer. It's like, or email them and I say, what is supposed to be happening in this panel right here? And they'll tell me.
You don't get the script?
Well, sometimes I don't. Not always.
Oh, if I were inker, I want the script so I can get all the details right.
Well, I do.
And if necessary, add some in.
Yeah, I do get the script sometimes, but there are. Well, for instance, I'm redoing Sirens right now. I'm coloring Sirens, and this was a black and white book that was done way back in the 90s. There is no script left, so I'm having to guess. Yeah, I'm having to guess. Is this some kind of formula? Is this blood they're pouring into the water? What is this? So I have
ooze.
Yeah. So I need to get the answers
responsibly.
Tommy says, "Good to see everybody.
Hi,
Full
Tommy.
house." Yes, it is, Tommy. How you doing,
If
man?
you were here,
Always good
Tommy,
to
it'd
see
be
you.
Fuller House.
Miss you.
Yeah.
Love you.
Wubba says, "Let an artist go free. You'll have a happy artist." Yeah, that is true.
Free.
That
Let
is
'em go free,
true.
like fire 'em, or-
You make this artist happy by giving him a good, fun story to tell. If I have a good story, man, I can layer stuff. I know what's going to, if I've read the whole script, which I should, which every artist should, what's coming, so you can foreshadow stuff in the art that may not even be in the script. So, if you've got a good story, you're inspired to really take it to the next level.
I had some fun with one artist I had from one of the comics I wrote. Since I wanted him to, I love the style, I wanted him to work for me. So I wrote an entire 3 pages of my script that's basically just a parody of one of his comics he worked on previously. And then I showed him that specific sample from the script, and that's what cooked him in.
That's awesome. Very nice.
That's awesome.
Very nice.
What hooks Tommy in is no dialogue, all sound effects. That's what hooks Tommy.
Man after my own heart.
Wubba says, "I just leave the room for the balloons best I can." As do I, Wubba. That's what I do as well.
Yeah, that's all you can do. Yeah.
Tommy says, "Several times during my Nightman run, asked for the script. I didn't know if it was day or night. Couldn't tell from the pencils."
That's
right. Sometimes you can't.
Yeah.
Sometimes well, it was night.
So you call and ask for the script?
It's night.
Because it's Nightman, so it's a Nightman script, right? So obviously it takes place.
Sometimes
darker shadow or lighter shadow.
Sometimes you don't.
I was working off this one script for coloring once, and there was constant time skips throughout the entire page, all the pages I was working on, but the script never said when a time skip was, and so you never knew if the character changed clothes or not. And there's there's a couple panels where the writer accidentally wrote a character in that wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. So the script was referring to people who weren't even in the panel.
Oh gosh, bizarre.
Yeah.
Well, guys, this.
Oh,
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, make the sky purple, always purple, and then everybody
always purple, and it always works. Usually, this is the point of the show where we want to bring in a little discussion on pop culture. I don't want to do any spoilers. Has everyone seen Book of Boba Fett episodes 5 and 6?
No.
Yep.
I don't get Disney Plus.
I'm
sorry.
I'm behind. I'm behind on everything.
Everybody's behind. So in the interest of being spoiler free, I'll skip it. Other than to say this, the spoiler free review. Number 1, episode 5 is awesome.
Okay.
It's actually Mandalorian episode 1 of season 3. That's basically what episode 5 is.
I've
It's
been
excellent.
seeing that on
Crossover.
Facebook. I've been seeing that on Facebook.
Yeah, me
It's
too.
fantastic. It really is good.
I've seen spoilers
And
on Tumblr.
there's some elements in it that call back to a lot of the animated series, and I don't want to go too far into that. Yes, the Clone Wars series. So you guys who are fans of Clone Wars will absolutely love the references there. And episode 6, I don't want to give it away, but those fans that are fans of the original trilogy are gonna go nuts on that one too.
I saw spoilers for that, so I know what you're talking
Oh,
about.
you did? Okay. Well,
like I said,
let's
I
just
hang
say,
out on Tumblr, which is
okay. It's better than you expect. Let's just put it that way.
Okay.
Is it as good as the low-speed car chase in episode 3?
I don't know if anything quite reaches the low-speed car chase episode 3.
Woo! Was it a white Bronco?
Actually, it looked like a
reference.
car chase with half of the cars were actually like rascals.
Yeah.
And you're like, they're chasing this one guy, and you're just like, dude, you could get out and run faster than this. And then Boba Fett jumps on his bantha and starts walking across the desert, and you're like, at this rate, he will still be doing this in episode 6. So yeah, I haven't reconciled that yet.
So you haven't seen it either, Brent?
I just saw the first 3 episodes. Everyone tells me it gets better, which
Yes.
I am thankful for, because
5 is the turning point.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say. 5 is the turning point. Because I was nonplussed with 1 through 3 as well. I was like, meh,
Yeah.
And I rarely say meh.
So now
It's
you're
like a lot of
hear-
story.
I'm hearing this a
really
lot.
gruntled.
Streamed shows like this that the first 3 were really meh, but it got better by 5. You know, if a TV show back in the day when we didn't stream had that kind of stuff, people would have given up by the second episode.
Next
Whereas
Generation.
now we've got 4 episodes before anything important happens, and I'm going. I keep hearing this, and I'm going, why would I want to watch the first 4 episodes? Then let me jump in on episode 5. I can catch
If you
up.
did, you know what, Rob? If you did jump in on episode 5, you would not be upset and you would not be disappointed at all. You'd be like, dude,
Yeah.
I literally
There you
said dude after. I mean, I was watching it by myself and stood up and was like, dude. And then I looked around and was embarrassed.
I would too.
It was that good. Yeah, it was that good.
I just keep
Okay.
thinking the Disney Plus executives, they've been watching me through Facebook or whatever, so they already know everything that I feel about Marvel and Star Wars. So, we don't want to hear your complaints, cash, or we will raise it yet
again. Yeah, exactly. I mean, how brilliant and insidious is the subscription model? I mean, it's like, it's not the liberty, only pay for what you need, right?
Nope.
No. It's you're going to pay whether you want it or not, right?
That's why I don't have Disney Plus.
See, I have a son who has.
That's why.
I have a son who has 2 kids, 2 very small ones. So he has Disney Plus, and I get the other.
See?
What's
that, Jeremy? Jeremy's jumping in here.
The proper way to do subscriptions is you only subscribe to watch the show you want. Once you've been through the whole thing, you cancel the subscription, jump onto a different platform.
Yes.
Then why not sell it a la carte?
That's what they should have done with cable like 40 years ago.
Yeah,
right.
Why not do
The
it a la
problem with
carte?
that is then you have to remember, and
But
that's my
cable has
problem.
cable has those fees you have to charge when you cancel. Subscription services
That's
do
how
not.
they get you.
That's the difference.
That's how they get you.
I want to be able to buy, and I did this with the Perry Mason New Perry Mason. I'm a huge Perry Mason fan. I've shared the fact that my day begins and ends with Perry Mason episodes.
Excellent.
But I watched the new Perry Mason because I bought it on iTunes after it had been out for a while, and it came out, and it was so I paid for it then. And I could buy the first one and go, okay, I kind of like it. So and then I could buy the whole season. But this whole bit of paying $12.99 a month for all this stuff that I probably won't watch. I mean, Netflix is about as far as I go because I get my money's worth out of Netflix.
Oh yeah,
good.
And yeah, so
I don't pay for that one
use
either.
that. My wife watches it every day. So, and we share that one with our daughter, and she shares Hulu with us. So,
oh yes, there's a lot of that,
that
trading subscription creds going on. Yeah, right. So this is online for everybody to see, right? So it's like,
Facebook execs are watching
no
Brent.
Subscription for this.
Hulu's watching us.
Hulu's watching, going, these guys right
Rob
here.
Rob
Davis.
Look,
My
I don't
kids-
even know these people. Hulu. Okay,
You allow your family
just
to
crashed.
use your access. You can access up to 3 or 4, I think.
Right.
So,
and my kids take care of the old folks, you know?
Well, do what I did. I bought a DVD changer and get the physical media, put it there.
Yeah, my son gets his Disney Plus from his in-laws. So that's and nobody else in the family has got Disney Plus, so I can't share that one with anyone. But and it's almost reached critical mass where it might be that where there's enough stuff on there I might want to watch that it might actually reach that point at some point. But then there's I'm a big Star Trek fan, but I don't I don't have that subscription either. So yeah.
Well, if you share too many credentials, you'll get the phone call. Mr. Davis, it seems that you have exceeded your sharing credentials.
Then
you just never know.
Off, and I'll stop paying you. Easy answer. I'll go back to this broadcast.
Right. Well, I back up
I got
everything
a hell of a DVD
with
collection.
Oh yeah, I back up everything with a physical copy anyway, right? So a friend of mine said, why are you buying Dune on Blu-ray? I mean, you just watch it on HBO Max anytime you want. And I'm like, until they take it off,
take it away.
HBO Max, and then
or they raise it to where I can't afford it anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm a big hard copy
in case
fan.
goes down the crapper, and then currency. So.
We're just preppers, man. We're preppers. We're hanging on to all that stuff. I want it physically, man. I just want to hold it. Okay, I want to hold it.
I just want to tell everybody I was right. I think that's what I'm waiting for.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Brent was right. We're all going to do that all simultaneously. Brent was right.
Brent.
And I'll just be like,
now.
Brent was right.
Oh gosh, look at what Richard Dunn says here. This is good. Go back to the BMG Music Forum and buying 10 CDs for a penny, and then promise to purchase 10 more programs over the next year. Yeah,
and never remember
to
cancel that subscription, and then they show up.
They just show up. You're like, what? They're going to charge me for this.
227.
Yeah.
God,
Madonna again? Oh.
Do you remember that episode of The Simpsons where Homer's like, I joined that music club, 10 albums for a penny, and then they jacked up the price.
Marge. Oh, guys, well, that brings us to the end of the broadcast. I really appreciate you guys being here and everybody that was watching. We had a great show. And we're going to close with really good show. We're going to close with our new closing bumper, guys. Here we go. Without
Hey, I'm Alex Saviuk, and I just want to let you know, make mine Silverline.